The way I see it is that there is a particular verse to help us understand what it means to be a Christian. And so right here, Romans 10:9, we have, because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. This right here, I think, sums up what it takes to become a Christian. Now, with this whole verse, there are these really important parts, and I want to kind of spend the next couple of days really like touching on some of them. And so today I want to talk about this part right here where it says Lord, because that's very, very specific. You see, I'm not reading clearly the King James Version, but I got the English Standard Version. But Paul, who wrote Romans, also didn't read nor write the King James Version, contrary to unpopular belief. But instead, Paul, the other authors of the New Testament, Jesus himself, read something called the Septuagint. And so when in the Septuagint is which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, because the New Testament was written in Greek, the Old Testament was written in Hebrew primarily. There was smatterings of Aramaic in there, but in what Paul wrote was this, and he this part right here where it says Jesus is Lord. Well, kurion, kurioniseun, this would be, actually, we would more literally translate it, the Lord is Jesus, but kurion right here is the word for Lord. You can see actually capitalized, like as in if it's a name. We don't get that in the English translations. Even the best translations don't catch that we're talking about a name here. And so this name is the name kurion, which we actually see throughout the Old Testament in the Septuagint, like here in Genesis 2:15, um, kurios. Greek, you have different forms of nouns, but kurios hatheos is how this is written in Greek. Well, okay, well, what's that actually say for us? And well, this is Yahweh Elohim, or well, you see this right here. We would say this, but this right here, Yud He Vav He, this is actually the what's known as the Tetragrammaton. There's a fancy way of doing it, but this is the name of the Lord, which we see here. And I'm going to put this in vertical so we can kind of see where things are going. But the Yud He Vav He, because Hebrew reads right to left instead of left to right. Well, typically we have like this is like a Y sound, and this is an H, and this is, well, either a W or a V, I guess. More recently, it's changed to a V, and then this is an H. Well, this is God's name that is sacred, and people weren't allowed to speak God's name. It had to instead be something that people would um, have to find some way around, especially if you know any Jews who would read the, say, read the Torah for bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. They would end up having to say something different because only the high priest was allowed to actually say the name of God. Now, this is his like real name, not just God like we would say, but like his actual name. And so what happened is sometimes because it was his name, they would say Hashem, which means in Hebrew means God, or I'm sorry, not God, the name. And then, or other people would say Adonai, which means my Lord. So what they did, the scribes took this to help people out because you're going through and the student would be reading the stuff and didn't want to say God's name. And so what would happen is originally there are no vowels. Well, there's no vowels in Hebrew, and so um, that are written down. Instead, what happens is the vowels were added underneath to help people with pronunciation. So what they did is they took the vowels for Adonai and they put those into the Yud He Vav He for God's name. And so you got these two dots here that match up here, or this little T thing that matches up here. And So these are right here what's going on. And this is actually where the mistranslation or mistransliteration really has we have come to know in the last couple centuries of Yehovah, and that's where Jehovah has that name has come from. But all of this is just to help point out that when we see here that this capital Lord right here is a name, not just Lord, which is important. It is true in the sense of obedience and submission, but more importantly, that this is the name of God, to say that Jesus is the God, and he is, and the Greek says that God, the God, is Jesus. So that's something for you, and I just wanted to share that with you. So there you go.